Welcome to another episode of the Plutus Awards Podcast. Our community is filled with hundreds of stories from creators and entrepreneurs just like you. And through this show, we share the stories of challenges and successes from bloggers to podcasters, from writers, speakers, and more. I'm your host, Michelle Jackson. Today's guests are Angela and Regina, co-founders of Women's Personal Finance, a massive community that is a safe space for women to talk about all aspects of how money shows up in women's lives. We talk about monetizing a community such as this one, the purpose it serves, and being able to lean deeper into their brand mission through intentional monetization, and of course, the pushback that occurred. I think you'll really enjoy this episode, and it's a very interesting conversation about how to grow a brand with intention and how the monetization strategy helps the creators to lean deeper into their brand mission.
Ladies, could you do me a favor and introduce yourselves?
Sure. This is Angela and Regina from Women's Personal Finance. This is Angela speaking. I'm the writer, blogger behind Tread Lightly, Retire Early, and Regina blogs over at That Frugal Pharmacist, and together we are Women's Personal Finance.
Regina, share more.
Again, this is Regina now, and I'm a pharmacist by background. I am mostly kind of doing this fun coast-fi, building businesses and figuring things out phase now, so not working as a pharmacist too much. I am a friend of Angela's, and we took Women's Personal Finance to a business level about 13 months ago. It's very specific there, about 13 months ago. We started talking about it in the fall of 2020 and then went live with it then. So us as a group, as Women's Personal Finance, have been doing this together for a little over a year now, and we've been friends and bloggers in our own spaces and very active online in the personal finance community for quite a few years.
Actually, if you guys could do me a favor and talk about your individual projects prior to this, I would love that. And Regina, if you could start with just how you even got into the personal finance space, that would be great.
I really came in as I would say being a part of the space on Twitter in my second iteration of Twitter personalities with That Frugal Pharmacist. At the time, I wasn't blogging, just wanted spaces to talk more about things around money, which are interesting to me and have always been important as I'm frugal and set lots of money goals and have done a lot of things kind of ahead of the curve. For example, I had my house paid off. I can't even remember the exact age. So sometimes they say 27, sometimes 28. But I bought a property and had
way ahead of like everybody, basically.
Very early, for example. And like I had already done that before I started blogging at all, debt-free at that point. Then when I was working more high income, and I wanted more places to be able to talk about a lot of those things. So started to get involved in the personal finance community on Twitter, which is where I met Angela eventually. As I was seeing that there was a lot more that I wanted to say and longer conversations that I wanted to have, typically in the form of some kind of rant, I decided that blog would be a more appropriate place to do that, and that it would be kind of a nice outlet to explore certain things. So I started the blog, I think in early 2016.
2017. We both started early 2017, I think.
Oh, yeah. 2016 is when my kid was born. Oh, so it was 2018 then. Maybe early 2018.
No, 2017.
No? I don't know. Angela knows dates a lot better than me. I started a blog.
Regina, I'm the same way.
I don't even know what year it is with the pandemic, by the way. Like, I'm having to back calculate things all the time and like actually do math to know what year things happened anymore. So I started the blog and I kept it pretty much anonymous because I was working regularly as a pharmacist at more than one place and wanted to be able to speak more freely about things. And it evolved from there, and I got more and more active and was looking to develop myself further as a writer. And I think that's when me and Angela probably really started talking and getting to know each other, when I started to reach out to people and offered to do a post on her site. I'll let Angela follow up with her story.
That's where we first really connected, was when Regina wrote a post on Prepperfy on my site. We actually ended up coining that term from that blog post. Before that, it was really just like there's the preppers and then there are the fire folks. And we're like, well, there's actually kind of a big overlap between those two things. And so that's how we started to get to know each other better. But yeah, like I said, we both started blogging in early 2017. But I had been a lurker in the personal finance community for a very long time. I started reading blogs back in 2010 when I started out paying off my student loans, but I was the ultimate lurker. I never commented, I never shared, I never had a Twitter. I was completely a passive consumer of personal finance content. And then in 2017, I finally decided that it was time for me to start actually talking and blogging and being more active. And once I started blogging, then I eventually got on Twitter and fell down the rabbit hole of most of my entire life outside of work and stuff being personal finance sphere centered. I feel like I found my people in the personal finance space. That's where that came from. Then Women's Personal Finance, the Facebook group, began in January 2018 after I'd written my blog post on Tread Lightly on Meet the Women of the Financial Independence community. From there, it was very clear we needed a space specifically for women's personal finance, specifically Fire Talk originally. But early on, we made a very intentional decision to make it women's personal finance with a subset on Fire, not a Fire group, because the goal is always to be more inclusive of people of all money stories, all places in their lives, and not niche down so far to, if you're not a Fire person, this isn't for you. That's not what women's personal finance is about.
I'm really curious as to why you decided to start the group. Like, why were you the ones to create this community? What compelled you to do that?
It really was that blog post that I wrote in early 2018.
Was it the reaction? It
was the reaction. It was, I posted it in the evening. I was still a fairly new blogger at the time. And I woke up the next morning and it had just completely blown up. And it was very clear early on that people needed that space to talk. We didn't just need a list. We needed a community. And
you got picked up by MSNBC or one of those, right?
I don't know. It got picked up a lot of places.
Whoa.
But yeah, it really was. It was initially the Facebook group first, like the very first people who joined were specifically personal finance content creators, a lot of Fire folks. And then as it grew, it became more about anyone interested in money that identifies as a woman or a non-binary person. Really, as long as you're not a cis dude, it's a group for you.
What surprised you about creating an online community? What were some of the tensions that came up? I'm a member of the community, listeners, so I definitely have observed the genesis of the group and the growth, and there were definitely some tensions and just some things that happened. What surprised you? Just share anything that kind of comes to mind.
I was going to clarify, Michelle, because there were different things that happened initially that Angela was more involved in when she got the group going. And I know that was a learning process. And then it's been a even different learning process once we made this a business. So I think there's perhaps two levels to that question.
Let's go with someone speak to the first part, and then you could speak to the second part as well.
I think the biggest thing is when the Facebook group first began, it was the first Facebook group I'd ever created. And so I was learning as I went. Initially, it was very much just an organic thing where we kind of just let things happen. And as the group has grown and as time has gone on, we've been very intentional with how things play out. We're very protective of our community. In order to be really inclusive to the folks that are there, we've learned that that really means that you have to exclude some people. There is no such thing as being inclusionary to every single person because there are some things that are just non-negotiable. We've really learned that being more forceful, and having brighter lines in the community has been very, very important.
Has it been uncomfortable for you to do that?
It was initially, but I think as time has gone on and we've kind of settled more into our role as basically the guardrails of the community and the way that we see that this is how we protect women, it's been easier. It's kind of like any other muscle. It's figuring out what makes sense. But at this point, we don't really have any qualms about showing the door for people who really don't belong.
Regina, could you touch on the difference between before and now? So this whole season, we're really talking about the tension that occurs when you monetize a personal finance project or brand. And I've been watching what you guys have been doing with so much interest because I really see how intentional you are about showing what you're doing with the funds, the rationale, that kind of thing. So if you could kind of talk about what the initial monetization conversation was like and any tensions around that, I would love to hear it.
I think I can pretty safely say I'm the responsible party for talking Angela into monetizing this. And
ooh,
it's very true.
Yeah.
Why did you
I had to be dragged along initially.
But why?
I'm there now.
Well, I think initially it had to do with realizing that Facebook community can only do so much was where the conversation started, and that in order to preserve the great community that Angela had built, and I was a moderator in the group at that point, so I was helping, but I like to generally stay a little bit more behind the scenes. So it was more on the back end and suggestions and things like that. But we were noticing a lot more, I don't know what to call it, policing, just things that we need to share and want to share, not showing up on Facebook. And we wanted an outlet where
I got sent to Facebook jail for...
Was that it? Was that what started it off?
I remember that.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
For repeating someone describing a situation as a smelly potato.
Yeah. So I guess that's probably it. So Angela was in Facebook jail, and I was like, we can't rely on Facebook like to always be here. We need to do something about it. And there's a lot of people here who care about what we're doing. And I think I had suggested let's work on getting a website up. So at least there's some other avenue for people to stay in touch if anything ever happens and pivot. And maybe we can get some blog posts there. And that was the initial idea. But when we started thinking about it a little bit more, we decided to add in an additional element of a premium community to go with it. It was interesting because me and Angela both do a lot in terms of community building and advocacy work and things that we're involved in that matter to us outside of personal finance. And we're experts. We recognize that there's a lot of knowledge that we have, but I don't think either of us really think of ourselves in terms of being finance experts. I know I personally struggle with that a lot. So we didn't want to create something that was about us because it really was about the power of the community and all of the connections and learning that we were seeing by just giving people a chance to be there and grow together. So that's been a really important thread in how we've grown and how we've done things as it moved along, is keeping in mind that this wasn't really intended to be about us. We're here, we're guiding, we're serving the community, but this wasn't meant to be the Angela and Regina community. It's the women's personal finance community. So initially we struggled with the self-promotion aspect of that and determining how to frame this in a way that let people understand we're putting so much work into this and we still want to support the community, but it needs to begin to support us in doing it so that we can do it well.
I'd say a big part of that too is that point about touching that it's not the Regina and Angela show. It's really the women's personal finance community. And a lot of personal finance spaces seem to be very centered around a single person or a couple of people. That's never been what we are about. Yes, we have become a face of it in a way, but more as like guides than the individual like light that is women's personal finance. That's always been really important to us.
Neither of us have even written on the website yet. We've been live for over a year and paying other writers, and I don't think we have any of our own content there. So we have really worked to try to make it about elevating other people, and probably too much at some points, because we're definitely here putting in the work. And that's been one of the biggest growth things, is getting more comfortable with the self-promotion that we have to do to promote the community itself, and gaining comfort as the face of the business and organization when we really want it to be about supporting people and the members. But I think the easiest way to kind of say that would be that we have put a lot of thought as we learn into trying to embody all of the principles and all of the things that we're trying to show people and share, not because we think we're awesome and great at it, but because we realize we are the visible ones. So we have to do our best to live what we teach, I guess.
What's really interesting to me about the community and how I see products developed, and the conversation that I notice around monetization and revenue within the group and within the brand, is that it really feels like a social good project versus you guys are creating something about you. For me, it really, out of all the projects that I've seen people develop in the last 5 years, you guys and Elevate and Plutus Foundation, those are the three in particular that it's very clear what the mission is, and that it's not about the founders and the creators. It's about the community. So I definitely want to point out that it's very obvious that you're being intentional around how you're approaching what you're approaching. And I think that the community is very responsive to it. But I wonder, when you started having products and that kind of thing, what was the reaction like? Did people push back, or were they weird about it? Or how did you frame it so that people were like, yeah, we'll be happy to pay for that, or we understand where this is going to?
Angela.
Yeah,
I'll let Angela grab that one. We definitely did get pushback, but I want to hear what she has to say.
I would say that we've had a core group of folks that have seen from the beginning that women's personal finance is that social good versus a Angela and Regina get rich scheme. Mm-hmm. And so we've had that core group of folks that are very, very passionate about women's personal finance and seeing that as a group effort and a reason to get paid. However, because the Facebook group had been around for a couple of years and it was completely free, the very first thing we monetized actually was paying our moderator team on Facebook.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that, actually.
Yes. So the very first thing that we set up was the Ko-Fi account for our moderators. And then from there, we kind of realized okay, there's something here. It was a lot easier, especially for me, because I've had an issue in the past. I'm leaning into it now, but the idea of getting paid for a passion project has been something that's been difficult for me to work through. Knowing first that I was doing it to pay our moderators and getting them paid for the endless hours and tireless work that they pour into the Facebook group, it was easier for me to say, yes, clearly they need to get paid. And then it was like, oh, wait. And then we'd have some people be like, Angela, you deserve to be paid too. It's been years of me pulling out of you're very aware of it. There's a subset of the personal finance space that thinks absolutely you shouldn't be paid for anything around personal finance, which when you really think about it is kind of odd, considering we are folks that are always talking about money and talking about advocating for yourself and getting paid what you deserve. But then somehow there's this disconnect that if you're talking about money stuff, then you shouldn't be paid, or it's somehow less noble. Of course, the people that generally make those conversations are folks that have had very well-paying day jobs. And it's not something you hear from people who have more low to moderate incomes. So I think while it comes from a good place for a lot of people, it can be kind of disingenuous, because the people that need to be paid and deserve to be paid then have to feel like they're doing something wrong, asking to be paid for their work.
You know, what's interesting to me about this? So when I rebranded my personal brand to Michelle is Money Hungry, part of the reason why I did that was to have a conversation around the name, because I knew that would make some people uncomfortable. And I'll never forget going to a conference, and it was before COVID, but I'll never forget it because it was here in Denver. And this woman like kind of reared back when she heard the name of my project. And she looked so offended. And I was like, I kind of called her out on it. I was like, I called my project this, Michelle is Money Hungry, because I wanted to have a conversation around the name and I wanted to elicit a response, like an emotion.
It worked.
And the fact that it upsets you, that I want to tell myself on a daily basis that it's okay to earn a living doing whatever it is that I want to do. And that those funds that I earn can help others, can help me, can pay off my debt. Like I was in a debt repayment journey, a big one at that time. And so telling myself, yes, it's okay to earn money when you're pouring in like hundreds and hundreds of hours of work, which I think people don't seem to connect the whole idea that being a content creator is very time consuming. And so there's a point where you have to make a decision around, is this making sense for me? And how are we modeling as creators of a community like this for women? What are we modeling to the people in our community?
I have something extra to add there because I totally agree, Michelle. Content creators, or the work that goes into it, is not valued at people have no idea the amount of work that goes into it and expect everything to be free. What I've noticed, because this isn't the first community I've been involved in building, I've done some other things personally, some other projects. And I think people value the community builders even less than the content creators, because, we don't have like a product per se. Our product is the communities that we're building. And it is hours and hours a week. I mean, I think me and Angela at least are putting in 3 or 4 hours every day, at least, and then more on many other days with all of the different things that we do. It takes a lot of work to curate a robust community that supports each other and has, standards that the community helps to reinforce for each other and makes it a safe place where people can learn. And back to the monetizing and what Angela said about some of the higher earners being the ones who seem to think you shouldn't monetize this. We've also noticed the higher earners often are the ones least willing to contribute or pay for these things.
Oh, wow.
And I found that quite frustrating, knowing the amount of work that we were putting in, and then that we were occasionally getting comments about, why are you asking for money for this group that you run? But, sometimes it's from somebody who we know maybe told a story about the job that they got via this group that they were in, or the connection that was made, or the information that they got that allowed them to negotiate a $40,000 increase on their income annually. People are getting so much value out of these groups, but they're only getting it because of a lot of work going into it from other people, and that deserves to be compensated. We'll figure out how as we go, and we keep growing and learning, but we've had a lot of levels of validation and reinforcement that we have the right idea in mind. And that started with just trying to get some compensation for the moderators, which I had forgotten was part of the initial start. We do it, and I'm well aware of it, but people will pay us for this. Okay, we're on to something here. Some people do see the value, and then we just bring it up more and work for it. And some people support it and some don't, but it seems to be working.
Don't you have like 30,000 people in the group right now or more?
52,000.
Just 52,000 people. I mean, that is a lot of moderation work. That's a lot of content curation. That's a lot of egos. That's a lot of emotion. I remember sharing, I don't know what the post was. It's to this day the only post that I've ever received this many likes on. I shared some random post in there. I don't know what it was about because it's during the COVID time, so I don't remember. And I literally got like 1,300 likes on that post. And I was like in all the time that I've been in numerous different groups, it amazes me how responsive and how active people are in the community. I think what would be interesting is to share, besides paying your moderators as well as your writers, what's the money for? Like, as you develop your products, what's your goal with the revenue that you're generating? Like, what's the end goal?
Well, right now, I'll just say I'd like to be able to focus on this more as my full-time work. That's part of the goal, is getting there for me in a way that I can devote a lot of time and effort to the community. But along the way, we're trying to do various initiatives and making sure we pay writers. We've moved on to paying our speakers, which we didn't do originally. Basically, as soon as the money is there to be able to compensate people for the work that we're putting in, we're trying to be very mindful of doing that and not waiting. So I think that's the backbone of things, is paying women for their work. And that includes us, though. We have to wait for our taxes to get done to find out if what we're getting paid for last year, because we still haven't taken a payout. The money's there. We were profitable last year, but that's been the goal, is to find ways to empower women, pay them, tell more stories. And I think we'd also like to see some more live events as things progress, and be able to support community in greater ways and help other people make strong connections that help them to meet their goals in life.
Have you ever applied for grants? Just as a random thought here.
We have a Plutus grant right now, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Plutus is sponsoring 3 insiders memberships each cohort launch quarterly.
Oh, wow.
So,
that's awesome.
Which is totally awesome.
You should check out my friend Danielle Desir's grants for creators.
I've been following her stuff. We've been trying to be very intentional about not adding new stuff and not going after shiny new things, because we both like to
squirrel.
Add things on. Yeah, squirrel. So Danielle's going to actually come talk to our insiders after her maternity leave too.
Join Julian Sanders, Janice Torres-Rodriguez, Jason Vitug, and more at the Plutus Impact Summit, a virtual event for financial content creators and influencers, on July 22nd and 23rd. See all the sessions and register for free at plutusimpact.com.
I would love to shift the conversation just a little bit and ask, what have been the most impactful conversations that you've seen in the group?
While we think on that for just a quick second before we move on, I
Absolutely
don't forget saying this, is, we talked about how we've got over 50,000 folks in the Facebook group now, and the tension between it being a completely free space and then asking folks to compensate people for their time, even fractionally. It's very strange that, Facebook is a ginormous company and they make so much money off of us, and they make money off of our group because it is so active and engaged. And nobody ever considers the fact that Facebook is making money off of them, because they don't pay with direct dollars, but Facebook makes giant amounts of money. And somehow the idea of paying then small individual folks is this huge ask when Facebook's making billions and billions of dollars. So I just want to
include that. Put our plug. We have 52,000 people there. If everybody there paid $1 a month, the amount of amazing things that we could do for the community and initiatives, and more money that we give to charitable causes, it would be absolutely amazing. And I'll give a plug for our Ko-Fi at the end of the podcast, if I'm allowed to.
Absolutely.
He wants to support us.
Could you do me a favor and share the initiatives that you've done so far? Because there have been quite a few at this point.
I don't know if our biggest charitable, ongoing thing right now is with what's going on in Texas and other states around women's reproductive health. We actually have a small WPF reproductive health fund, so that if folks need access to contraceptives, pregnancy tests, abortion care, then they can reach out to us and we can help support with dollars on that front. It's been pretty low key at this point, but we also both feel very strongly about mutual aid and direct giving versus having a specific set up charity that, you have to go through hoops. We feel very strongly about just getting dollars to people. So we also have done a number of just direct giving threads where we'll kick it off with $50 for a couple of folks. And then the community actually comes in and will start basically a giving chain of no strings, here's $50. And we'll get stories about someone took that $50 and bought her grandmother overnight underwear for adults because she didn't have the money for it. Another person was able to fill up her gas tank to take her kids to daycare so she could go to work. Women's personal finance is really about paying women and supporting women and lifting them up and realizing that we don't need so many barriers in place to help.
Another thing that we do is our initial promise when we developed the premium community that 1 out of every 10 of our annual memberships is basically a gifted membership from Angela and I, because we realize that cost can be a burden, and we think that people who can afford it and people who can't afford it all can benefit, and they also learn things from each other. And we want to support people who are at whatever stage of their financial journey. Every time we do a launch, we give away at least a few memberships. We now have people who help out and offer to sponsor more, and Plutus is sponsoring some of those memberships. But significant amount of our premium community is members who are there either from memberships that me and Angela give away or ones that are sponsored. And it's funny, like that's such a basic part of what we're doing that I think we forget to mention that because I didn't think of it until now to bring it up. So that I think that is a big part of the charitable part. We treat them like every other member of our community. They get a coupon code to be able to join, but once they join, we don't know who they are. Like, we don't pay attention to it. They get the same welcome packet that everybody else gets. They get access to all of the events. And we decided to do an annual membership versus you get a free month or something like that, because it can take a while. It can take a while to get comfortable in a new community. It can take even longer to get comfortable having some of these conversations if they're not something that you're already used to taking part of. And we want to give them enough time to at least, get their feet wet and hopefully start making some meaningful changes. And if they can afford it and they want to continue to be a member in the future, they're welcome to do so. But we want them to feel like full members of our community. And that's a very important part of what we do.
What I'm really struck by when I'm in the women's personal finance group are the unique financial conversations that the women are having in the group. And I'm going to vaguely share some that really stand out to me, like as consistent threads. Like they come up a lot. Conversations around separation and how women are impacted when they are separated from their spouse, and maybe the spouse is the breadwinner and the woman's been home as a stay-at-home mom and how that impacts their life. I noticed that one quite a bit because my mother was a stay-at-home mom for 7 years, and then she ended up divorced. And there are a lot of statistics around how women go into poverty when that happens. And so I'm feeling a little like, oh, because I remember that time. And I'm always like so moved by how helpful and how passionate the community members are when someone very vulnerably shares, this is what's happening to me, and I need help, and I'm really scared. And these ladies like step up. Then there's the conversations around, hey, I'm like trying to negotiate a raise and I feel really nervous about that. Like, what's your advice? Or it's just been amazing to me because I'm in different financial groups, and I know that there are a lot of people who say money is money and you just have to like earn more and save less and invest. And I'm like, if you were in these groups with me and other people, the nuance around these conversations, like your mind would be blown if you were self-realized enough to even pay attention to it. So again, what are some of the conversations that you're just like, this keeps coming up, and what do we do about it?
I would say also those conversations, and we have always been very specific that there are no off-topic conversations, that A, everything really does have to do with money, and B, we are about whole people here, that we are not portioning off money into some corner of life, kind of like, oh, how does divorce have to do with money? Or how does relationship strife have to do with money? Or there really isn't anything that's separate. We'll occasionally get someone asking, how does taking up more space as a woman have anything to do with your finances? And clearly there's a financial link there, but even if it's something you can somehow find doesn't have to directly do with money, we're not just talking money here.
What do you see the next couple of years looking like in terms of the growth of the group and just your goals for the women's personal finance community? Like what are your goals? What do you hope for?
Well, we would love to see our premium community grow somewhat, though we do have some kind of break checks on that. We only let in about 50 members when we open quarterly because we want the community to feel supported. We want new members to be able to feel integrated, and we want a community feel. We really want strong connections where people are getting to know each other and able to take these connections to other places in their life. So we're looking forward to more growth with the Women's Personal Finance Insiders community, but we've already had discussions about at some point in the future if we're going to need to cap that. That wasn't something we had to consider at first because we were just excited to see if people were willing to pay for a more premium community, but we're realizing that's something that will need to happen in the future. Along with that, we've this launch that we just wrapped up in March was the last at our initial price. So we'll be increasing the price somewhat in line with trying to keep it the premium community and support things as it grows, knowing that it can't grow forever and maintain that quality. Those are two things, and definitely continue to grow and expand on the website and be able to bring more women content producers in and share a lot of diverse stories. That's really what we're excited about. Is it's a platform to get a lot of different conversations out, and not any specific topic, but women's issues that, as Angela said, affect money, because so many things do.
Do you host the premium community on Facebook as well, or is it offline? Like, is it on Circle.io or some other platform?
Yeah, it's on Discord, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, which has actually been really nice because it has more of like a group text chat feel than Facebook. It does seem to be a more community platform than Facebook. It's a
more intimate feel than Facebook.
Mm-hmm. And we have some folks that really just don't want to be on Facebook, don't want to be on social media. And so it's a nice place to still have that community connection without having to be on Facebook.
We're winding down the conversation, and I want to circle back to something that you both talked about at the beginning of our conversation, which was you started out doing a lot of content on Twitter. And I want to talk about why Twitter worked for you, what didn't. And I'm a huge fan of Twitter. I don't know why I like it so much. I like it. I just do. And I think that a lot of folks are puzzled as to how they can leverage Twitter as a platform. It's made me a lot of money, by the way, as well.
Tell me how. I need to learn how to make Twitter make me money, Michelle.
Besides women's personal finance, because it's definitely connected.
Yes. Well, for me, for Twitter, it's just, so here's a tip. I follow a lot of people who are either editors or people in media. And so if you're looking for freelancers in particular, if you're a freelancer listening to this, if you're not following editors on Twitter, it makes no sense, because they will do a call for content on Twitter and you have to be pretty responsive to that, like pretty quickly. Also on Twitter, a lot of times they'll have how to contact them, which is, for a lot of people, there's a lot of gatekeeping on websites and things like that. And it's difficult to figure out how to contact them. And if you don't have like LinkedIn Pro or whatever that is, you may not have the capability to directly DM them. But on Twitter, a lot of times they share their emails. I also am connected with a lot of journalists on Twitter. That's how I've gotten a lot of media around my projects because they get to know me over time.
Oh, if any of them are listening, they're welcome to follow me at Frugal Farm, PHARM, and they can follow Angela at Tread Lightly, Retire Early, and they can follow Women's Personal Finance, which is Angela. What's her handle?
Angela's handle
is not Tread Lightly, Retire Early because it doesn't fit. It's too long.
Yeah, okay. I don't know. Maybe
we'll share it in the show notes. But
yeah.
But the other thing I would say is I follow local and national journalists and international. So now with what's going on overseas, I've added several international journalists to my do follow list. If you're looking for projects and things like that and people to amplify your voice, regularly follow these folks because they're always looking for content. And sooner or later, they'll notice your project and they'll reach out.
For what I think for Women's Personal Finance, what's been great about Twitter has been the content creator connections and relationships. We do a monthly personal finance expert who comes and speaks to our insiders every month. Those connections are almost entirely based on folks that we've connected with on Twitter. So
as a shout out for anybody looking to work with us, is most everybody we work with so far, we have a personal connection with because we have a wide group of people who we connect with on Twitter in particular.
People that you probably haven't seen because we've all been at our houses for the last 2 years.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Regina and I have met each other in person 3 times now, I think.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I have parent friends that I haven't seen since March 11th, 2020. Because they have small kids and they're just like, you know what, we're good.
Yeah, and that's us. I have a 6-year-old with special needs. He's a cancer survivor, and Angela's got a 7-year-old. So yeah, we're definitely sequestered.
Yes. And I only send clean air your way. Clean air. Ladies, I appreciate your time so much. I could talk to you forever, but we're not going to do that because it's almost dinner time, I think, for both of you guys.
Yep.
Again, for folks who are looking to follow you or support what you're doing, could you share how we can do that as well?
You can always email us at hello@womenspersonalfinance.org. Our website is womenspersonalfinance.org. That mission supporter page that I had mentioned is ko-fi.com. That's ko-fi.com/women's personal finance. If people appreciate our message and want to help us out with a one-time or recurring donation. And I will probably follow up with the personal follows in the show notes for you.
And of course, if you're on Facebook, join the Women's Personal Finance community there as well.
Do you guys have questions that we have to answer?
Yes.
Okay. So answer the questions. Don't skip the questions when you request to enter the group.
You will not be let in if you do not answer them, or if you answer them in a way that is going to be disruptive to our community.
Perfect. You heard it here first, folks. Please support Women's Personal Finance. I love this community. I've been a part of it for years. I've actually written on the website. I just love this mission-driven project, and I thank you guys so much for joining me on this show.
For having us, Michelle.
Yeah, it was great to talk, and someday we'll see each other in person again.
One day.